Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf Nun Zayin 57 of Sanhedrin. We are in the middle of discussing the laws of the Shiva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, the seven Noachide laws. I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started. And we are, and so what are those laws? So although there's a debate about them, we learned that the main opinion is that the seven laws are, first of all, the big three sins: idolatry, sexual transgressions, and murder. And then the other four, I heard this from Rabbi Leibowitz, although I know that he didn't come up with it, can be remembered with the mnemonic Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Daled. Aleph for Aver Min Hachai, that's eating a limb of a live animal. Bet for Baruch Hashem, which is actually quote unquote blessing God. It really refers to doing cursing instead. Gimel is Geneva or Gezel, theft, really Gezel, theft. And then Dalid is dinim is laws. So and that's talking about having a civil law system. And so those are the seven laws. And we saw that Rabbi Yochanan derived these seven from the verse in Bereshis that says, Hashem God commanded upon man, saying, of every tree of the garden you may surely eat. And we broke that down and said each of the different words or grouping of words or phrase referred to one of these seven laws. But we also saw that there are several additional laws or substitutions that people make among the Noachide laws. For example, the Yeshiva of Menashe taught a brisa that replaced numbers 5 and 7 on your screen, that replaced blessing God and laws with sterilization and kalayim. And so as we pick up on the fourth to last word on the third line from the bottom of Nun Vav Amud Bet, the Gemara asks about the source of the seven commandments identified by the brisa of Yeshiva Menashe. So again, we have seven laws. Everybody, it seems like there was an understanding that was in fact the right number, at least according to many of the opinions that we've seen. But the question was, which seven laws? Right. And so now, and we can't use the same pasuk because the words don't tie up. The words that we had for blessing God and for laws don't tie up, can't also be used for sterilization and kalayim. So the Gemara asks, Tana debe Menashe, idarish vayitzav, if he's going to learn his seven laws from that same pasuk that we just saw, again, Bereshis Bet, pasuk Tet Zayin, well then, afilu hanachnami, even the ones that he omitted should be counted. Meaning, how are you going to say that the words that refer to laws and blasphemy refer to anything else? Ilo darish v'yitzav, and if he doesn't use v'yitzav, hani manila. So how does he? Excuse me. Hane manale. How does he know them? So what's his source? So the Gemara answers, actually, he does have a source. La'olam lo darish vayitzav. He does not use that pasuk. And so as a result, he's going to find a new source for each of the seven. So hani kochada v'chada ba'ape nafshik ksiva. And we can derive each of the other seven from their own respective sources. And so now that's exactly what the Gemara is going to do. And in each case, the Gemara is going to ask, well, 1 second. Okay, you say that that's the source for you, Yeshiva of Menashe, but why not? But why does the other opinion? What does the other opinion do with that source? Because now it seems like we have two sources for all of these commandments. So let's take a look. Avodah Zarah v'gilu arayos, the prohibitions associated with idol worship and sexual transgressions, diksiv batishachet haaretz lifnei haElokim, that the land was corrupt before God. So what is the nature of this corruption? This is Perek Vav, Pasuk Yud Aleph, just before the world was destroyed in the flood. V'tana devei Rabbi Yishmael, and we have a brisa that was taught in the yeshiva Rabbi Yishmael. V'chol makom shenemar hashchasa. Whenever the Torah uses the phraseology of hashchasa, eino ela dvar erva ba'avodas kochavim. It's indicating idolatry and sexual matters. So dvar erva, we know that hashchasa can mean a sexual item. Shenemar ki hishchis kol basar es darko. And when the all flesh had corrupted its way, that this is in Bereshis Perek. I'm sorry. This is the next pasuk in Bereshis in connection with the flood. Perek Vav pasuk Yud Bet, and Rashi says Ki yishchud kol basar es darko al haaretz. So it's not necessarily clear. How do you know that this refers to sexual misdeeds? But Gilui Arayos, we know that this refers to sexual misdeeds. Diksiv derech gaver ba'alama, that the way of a man is to have relations with a woman. So it seems clear that that pasuk in Mishlei, Perek Lamed pasuk Yud Tet, that and that it's referring to a sexual relationship. But Dor Hamabel al Ha'arayas Nanshu, and we know that the generation of the Mabel was destroyed, punished because of their sexual misdeeds. Kediksiv vayiru b'nei Elohim ha'Elohim, that it says that the children of the rulers, the sons of the rulers, they saw at benot ha'adam, the daughters of man, ki tovot heina, that they were good. So it's clear from that pasuk, which is also in Bereshis, and indeed is earlier in that same chapter, that refers to sexual relations. And avodas kochavim, we can also see back into the Gemara, and again, we're now on the top of Daf Nun Zayin Amud Aleph, third line, middle of the line. I'm sorry. We're now fourth line, middle of the line. Excuse me. Avodas kochavim diksiv hen tashkis va'asisem, because it says in Dvarim Perek Daled pasuk Tet Zayin that lest you become corrupt and make. And what is the continuing of that verse? It's making idols. Specifically, it says, "V'asisem lachem pesel tmunas kol semel tavnis zachar onikeva," that with some kind of image on it. So the bottom line is that you're not allowed to make idols. So we see that hashchasa can refer both to sexual misdeeds and to idolatry. V'idach. So what about the Tana who learns it from the pasuk of Vayitzav? Why doesn't he learn it from here? Or what does he do with this pasuk? Or chayu tekam megale. This is telling us what the generation of the flood did in order to be punished. Shvichus damim. So we've dealt with the first two. Now we have number 3, murder. How do we know that? Diksiv, again, we can't go to that first pasuk in the pasuk in Perek Bet, pasuk Tet Zayin. So we say Diksiv shofech dam hadam. It says that this is a pasuk Bereshis Perek Tet pasuk Vav, that whoever sheds the man of blood, ... his blood should be shed. And so as a result, that shows that that's talking about murder, and the person gets killed. V'idach. What does the other Tana say? What does he do with this pasuk? Katalayu hu kadamkagale, hu kamagale. That in fact this is teaching us what kind of execution Noachite is given. Okay, because and there are two ways of reading this verse. First is is the simplest is shofek dam ha'adam ba'adam, that if somebody kills somebody within humanity, damo yishafech, his blood shall be spilled. Well, we only have 4 methods of killing. We have stoning, we have burning, we have beheading, and we have strangulation. Now, of those, only one of them is causing a blood to be spilled, and that is exactly as Stan runs his fingers against his throat. That's the guillotine, or chopping off somebody's head. So as a result, that is clearly the reference to it. And we will see shortly that there's another way to read this that says the following, that reads the pasuk as shafok dam ha'adam, if you kill a human, ba'adam, in that human that you are now going to kill, that the perpetrator, damo yishafech, inside him, his blood should be spilled. So in that situation, what is the situation where effectively you're, spilling, or one could put it slightly differently, stopping the flow of blood? Well, that without necessarily harming the rest of the body. So that is strangulation. So we will see that some understand this verse as telling us that non-Jews get saif for everything. They get the sword, they get beheading, and some say that they get chanek, they get strangulation. But we'll see that as we go. But the bottom line is that the first Tana uses that verse for telling us what kind of execution. Gazel. How about gazel? How do we know that? Diksiv ki yerek esav nasati lachem eskol. That this is the pasuk Bereshis Perek Tet pasuk Gimel, where it says, like grassland vegetation, I've given you all things. So V'amar Rebbe Levi, and Rebbe Levi explains, how does that mean, Steph? Because Kiyerek Esav, you should take things that are like grassland vegetation, meaning things that are not owned by someone else. Below Kiyerekina, but you can't take a garden vegetation that belongs to somebody. So that refers to theft. V'idach hahula mishrei basarhu da'asa. No, that pasuk comes to, according to the other Tana, that pasuk comes to teach us about the ability to eat meat, which was not permitted to Adam, as we will see in a day or two. So, because what does it say in that pasuk? It says, "Kol remes asher hu chai lachem yiyeh lachla." Any kind of being that's alive, you can now use to eat. Now it's like going to be like the vegetation, meaning before you could only eat vegetation. Now that you saved all of the animal kingdom, Noach, now you have the right to eat animals as well. And so that is what that pasuk is coming to teach, according to the second view. According to the original view that we had, that we learned from Vayitzab. Aver minachai. How do we know that aver minachai is prohibited? Diksiv ach basar benafsho damo lo sochelu. Because the Torah says, this is also in Bereshis Perek Tet pasuk Daled, that the flesh with its soul, its blood, you shall not eat. So ve'idach. What does the other opinion do with that? Why the repetition? And again, all of these are sort of the commands that God gives immediately. You're seeing it all from the vast majority of it from Perek Tet of Bereshis, because those are the commands that God gives as Noach is leaving the Teva. V'idach hahula mishrei mishuratzim hu da'asa. No, that's coming to tell Noach that in fact he's allowed to eat, and so too all Noachites would be allowed to eat limbs of crawling creatures. So like the leg of an alligator. Although in general we say you're not allowed to have aver min achai, when it comes to certain like lizards and things of that sort, which are creepy crawly things, especially where they may grow back. But the bottom line is those things you are allowed to eat. They aren't covered by the prohibition of Aver Min Achai. Now, of course, for Jews, those things are not kosher, so it doesn't make a difference. Okay, Seirus. How about sterilization? Now, of course, that was one that didn't exist for the first opinion. So how do they learn that? Dixiv shirtzu va'aris urvuva. Because the Torah says, again, Tet in Bereshit, Pasuk Zion, that you should swarm in the earth and multiply in it. So that suggests that you have a requirement to multiply and produce descendants. And so obviously, if one were to sterilize themselves, they're violating that prohibition. So v'idach, well, why doesn't the first Tana say that this is in fact a command? So Levracha Ba'alma, he says, no, it's just a blessing. It's God wishing that humanity should fill the earth. Kilayim, what about Kilayim? Dixiv ma'of leminehu. Well, you go back to when Noah gathered all the animals into the Teva, and it said that you needed to take the birds after their kind. This is Bereshis Perek Vav Pasuk Kaf. And it says, Me'a'of leminehu, u'min ha'be'ema lemena, mikol remes ha'adama leminehu, shnayim mikol yavo elecha lahachayos. You should bring two of them in order for them to live. That indicates that we want them to all be coupled. And so doesn't that suggest that you can't engage in Kilayim and the mixing of breeds? So the Idach, how does the other Tana do with this? Because of course they say that non-Jews are allowed to engage in Kilayim. Hahu l'tzavsa ba'alma. No, it's just telling us a good advice for Noah, that we want companionship for the animals, that they should be able to have. It doesn't tell us that they can only be mated in that manner. So that is that finishes our review of the 7 mitzvos, and now we've provided another source for each of the 5 that are in common, and we've also provided sources for the 2 new ones that the yeshiva of Menashe had according to the Tana from that yeshiva. So Amar of Yosef. So now the Gemara turns to the penalty for violating the 7 Noachai laws. So Amri Bey Rav Yosef said that it was said in the Academy Yeshiva of Rav Al Shalosh Mitzvos Benen Noach Narag, that the Noachite is killed for 3 different of the 7 commandments. And how do I remember them? Gesher Simon. Their reminder is Gesher, like a bridge. So what are they? Al Gilui Arayos, that's sexual relations. Al Shvichus Damim, that's murder. Val Birkas Hashem, and cursing God's name, or blessing, quote unquote, God's name. So, of course, Gilui Arayos, that's the Gimel. Shafichos Damim, that's the Shin. Here, it doesn't quite fit. The mnemonic is just used for the second letter. It's not quite an acronym, because the Reish is for the Reish, as that's the second letter in Birkas Hashem. Okay, so Maskivla Rav Sheshes asked the question, so Bishlam Shvichus Damim, I understand why the murder is subject to the death penalty. Diksiv Shafoch, Shofech Dam Ha'adam, we are Ba'adam, Damo Yishafech, because we have the pasuk that says specifically that whoever sheds the blood of a person is going to have their blood shed. Elahanach Minalahu, how do you know the other 2? And moreover, igamar meshvichus damim, if you're going to learn from one of the 7 mitzvos to the other 6, afilu kulhonami, we should learn to all 6, not just 2 of the other 6. And imashumd is rabba'i mi ish. And if you're going to tell me that it is because the phraseology, ish, the repetition of that, which tells us any man, and which we used as a basis to say when it comes to blasphemy, that it doesn't just mean Jews, but even non-Jews are subject to it, well then, avodas kochavim nami is rabbi me ish. Not only do you have ish, that phraseology, by Gezela, and by Gilui Arayos, and Birkas Hashem, but we also have it by Avodas Kochavim, by idol worship. So there should be 4 laws for which one is punished with the death penalty. So Ella Amar Rav Sheshes, so therefore Rav Sheshes says, Amri Bei Rav, they actually said in the yeshiva of Rav, Al Arba Mitzvos Ben Noach Nerag, that actually a Ben Noach is killed for 4 different violations, namely Gilui Arayas, Shvichus Damim, Birkas Hashem, and Avodas Kochavim. So those are the 4. So Al Avodas Kochavim Ben Noach Nerag. Well, 1 second. Is it really true that a Noachite is killed for idolatry? It seems like that's not the case, because V'hatanya ba'avodas kochavim, when it comes to idolatry, dvarim shebeis din shel Yisrael mimisin aleihem, when a Jewish court would kill a Jew, ben Noach muzar aleihem, a Noachite is just warned about it. So what is the implication? Azhara in misalo. They're warned they don't get the death penalty. So Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Azhara shalahen zuhi misa son, that the warning for a non-Jew is equivalent to saying that they're going to get executed. Now, what exactly does that mean? So there are 2 ways of understanding. Rashi understands, well, one way of understanding it is to say that in those 4 cases, or according to Rav Sheshis, we have some kind of special limud. Either it explicitly says death, which it does in connection with in connection with a murder, or we have the ish drasha that specifically says that non-Jews are treated, or are effectively treated like Jews with respect to those commandments. And so as a result, that is sufficient to constitute a warning, and therefore the warning is sufficient to cause the death penalty. The problem with that is that all 7 of the mitzvahs b'nei Noach are actually in the Torah, and so as we've seen, because whatever list you give for them, they're listed. But so therefore, Rashi says the following: Azhara shalahem, second of the wide lines near the end of the wide line in the bottom of Rashi. So Azhara shalahem kilomer kol azhara ditana tana gabi b'nei Noach zuhi misa. That any time that we have a Tana specifically telling us that non-Jews, that B'nai Noach are going to be killed for a mitzvah, that constitutes the warning. Shalahem. He mitzvah shalahem, misa shalahem. Delo dayak bahu Tana lemitni misa, that when a Tana says, teaches about these rules, and he calls it a warning, he does not need to call it death. Gabi chayav misos, when it comes to something that's obligated for the death penalty for a non-Jew. The azhara, and a warning, b'she'ein behen misa, kilagabi Yisrael. And so as a result, it's a warning alone, even without misa, is just like a command that has misa in it for a Jew. And so as a result, Rashi says that no, it's based on whether or not there is a Tana that tells us that there is a death penalty. So those are the 2 ways to understand this Gemara. But all right, now that we've got this basis, so we now understand Rav Sheshis' viewpoint. So now,
does death penalty apply to the non-Jew here then, according to Rashi, or not?
Yeah. So everybody, both whether you Rashi or the other approach, according to Rav Sheshis, there will be 4 death penalties for the non-Jew. Now we are about to see that there's the further opinion, and that's where we're going to go next.
But it seems like Azhara is not really death penalty, but it's sort of like death. So it's not, Rashi seems to say it's not actual death, but
no, he's saying that you actually would give the death penalty to a non-Jew in these 4 cases. That the fact that when it says that there's a warning in the Brisa, that warning constitutes a death penalty, means death penalty. Even though the Brisa does not explicitly say it. And what Rashi is saying is that when a Tana refers to an Azhara with respect to a non-Jew, that constitutes effectively a warning that they will in fact get the death penalty. That it actually means that the non-Jew will get the death penalty. That it's effectively like referring to death for a Jew.
So
Now,
it's automatic then. So I mean, typically we've been learning that people tend to have to be warned by Adam first for in a
so
Jewish court, right? And then but then only after the warning in certain ways you have Adam, da da da. Then if he's convicted, then he or she could get the death penalty. But here we're saying we're using azhar in a different way. Is that the point?
Yes, yes. Azhara. Remember, I mentioned this yesterday. Azhara has two meanings in the context of the Gemara, and maybe even more. But Azhara means the warning that we give before we actually, that the witnesses give to the perpetrator before he takes his act and then subjects him to the death penalty. And Azhara refers to the psukim in the Torah that tell us a second time that there is a specific commandment. And we have a principle in Judaism for Jews that when it comes to the different commandments in the Torah, you need to have a repetition so that one time it tells us the penalty and one time it just tells us the prohibition. And you need to have both. So there's the word azhara is used in both those contexts. And so here, according to Rashi, it's again used more in the second of those contexts, in the context of as if there's a pasuk, but he's saying that it's actually even just the words of a Tana are sufficient. But the bottom line is we're going to actually paskin like the third opinion. So let's take a look. Rav Huna, Rav Yehuda, Bechulu Talmidi de Rav Amri. So everybody in the yeshiva of Rav says the following. We are about 15 lines down in the wide lines of the Gemara. Al Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach nerag. A Noachite is killed for all 7 of the mitzvot. It's not just one. It's all or 3. It's not just 3 or 4. It's all 7. And Gali Rachmana b'chada v'hu adun l'chulo. And just as was posed by Rav Shesh's question that, hey, if you're going to learn from Shafot Dam, that if you're going to learn from murder to everything else, well, then all 7 should be required to have the death penalty. And that's exactly what Rav Huna, Rav Yehuda, and all the disciples of Rav, they all said that was the teaching. And in fact, that seems to be how we paskin. Vala Gezel ben Noach nerag. Well, one second, is it really true that a Noachite is killed for theft? Because what about the following brisa? V'hatanya al hagazel ganav v'gazal v'chein yifas. I'm sorry, al hagazel ganav. When it comes to theft, ganav, if you stole, v'gazal, or you robbed, v'chein yifas toar, or you took a beautiful captive in battle. And other things like that. And we're going to come to what are the other things that are like stealing and taking a captive, but we'll get to them. Kusi bekusi, if a non-Jew does it against another non-Jew, bekusi be Israel, or a non-Jew does it against a Jew, asur, it's prohibited. The Yisrael bekuti mutar, but a Jew against a non-Jew, it's permitted. And now Rashi quickly tells us, Yisrael Bakuti Mutar, Delo Tashok Esreyecha, because the verse of not not cheating your fellow, Ksiv, it says your fellow, is written, and this is Parak Yud Tet, Pasuk Yud Gimel in Sefer Vayikra. Velo Kuti, the implication of Reyecha is not somebody who's not Jewish. However, umidirabanan ikalamanda asar mishum chil Hashem ba'gazul basra. But we saw in Baba Kama that actually there are those who say that it's actually prohibited. Now, this is not a universal view that says that the prohibition of stealing from a non-Jew is only a rabbinic prohibition. There are some who say that this is actually a machlokas Tanaim, and that in fact there are some who say that the prohibition on stealing from a non-Jew is also biblical. But in any event, at least according to the Tana in this brisa, who seems to say that from the Torah you're allowed to, Rashi is quickly telling us that even if you were allowed to it would be prohibited rabbinically. So doesn't this show, because it says asur, prohibited, and not chayav, which is liable to the death penalty, doesn't that show you're not killed? Ve'im isa, right? If in fact it was true that you would be liable for execution, nisnei l'chayev, it should have said chayev. So mishum de kabay lemisnei seifa Yisrael bakuti mutter tana reisha aser. No, because we wanted to say usually you have chayev and putter. Chayev is liable, putter is exempt, and then you have usr and mutter. Well, because one is prohibited and one is permitted. So because we are going to actually use the word permitted in connection with a Jew stealing from somebody who's not Jewish, so then we wanted to use the parallel term earlier, but it does not literally mean asur but not chayav. Really, they would be chayav, and they are subject to the death penalty. V'hakol hecha de islei chayuva misnei katani. But one second, that same brisa earlier says that in fact de katani reisha, because it says earlier in that brisa al shvichos damim, when it comes to murder, kuti bekuti b'Yisrael chayiv Yisrael bekuti patur, that when it comes to murder, a non-Jew who kills another non-Jew or a non-Jew who kills a Jew, that person is liable to execution. Whereas a Jew who kills a non-Jew is exempt from execution. So that seems to suggest that in fact there is that this brisa knows how to use the word chayiv when it's applicable. So Hasam Hechi Lisnei. Well, one second. In the second case, what did you want it to say? Lisnei Asar Umutar? You wanted us to say prohibited and permitted, but that's not true. It is not true that a Yisrael can go ahead and kill a non-Jew. It's not permitted, but rather it's just you're not subject to the death penalty. V'hatanya kusi v'roe behema daka lo ma'alin v'lo marinin. We have a general rule that when it comes to the and Rashi tells us that this is referring to saving somebody from a pit where they will die or lowering them into a pit where they will die, that there is no obligation when it comes to a kuti or even a Jewish shepherd of small animals, because a Jewish shepherd of small animals, Rashi tells us, is often a thief, and because they often will graze their animals in fields that don't belong to them. So as a result, although you don't have any requirement to save them from a pit where they might otherwise die, you're not allowed to put them in that pit where they might die. So as a result, it's clear that we're not allowed to kill either, even a non-Jew. So kiyotze bo begazel maihi. So okay, I'm sorry. So that ends that discussion, and now we go back to the point that we made in the beginning of when we cited the brisa. We said v'chein kayotze behen. We said that there are other things that are similar to theft and to stealing and robbery and to the beautiful captive. So first, our question is what is similar to robbery? Kiyotze bo begazel maihi. What's the thing that's similar to robbery that we're saying again that it is going to be prohibited for a kuti to do against a kuti, for a non-Jew to do against a non-Jew, for a non-Jew to go do against a Jew, but for a Jew to do against a non-Jew, it will be permitted. So what could that be? So Amar Rav Acha. So we're going to give a series of potential answers to this question. So three possible answers. So Amar Rav Acha bar Yaakov lo nitzraka ela poalei b'kerem. It's talking about workers in a vineyard who eat the grapes during the time that they are working. So poa b'kerem amos. When are we talking about these workers? Ibishas gemar malacha. If we're talking about when the grapes are ready to be picked, haterahu. Then they're allowed to eat some grapes. If you hire somebody to pick grapes for you, they are allowed to eat some of those grapes while they're working. And if we're not dealing where the grapes have already matured, gazel ma'al, well, then it's complete theft for those workers to take it because the grapes need to be allowed to ripen. So as a result, we reject approach number one, and Rav Papa offers his own answer. And he says, no, we need this for theft of something that is less than a shava pruta, less than, a small amount of money. Well, ihachi kuti b'Yisrael aser. Well, 1 second, is it really true that a kuti would be prohibited to steal that small amount from a Jew? Ha bar machilahu. A Jew is by definition somebody who is going to pardon the theft of something very small. And so that's how one can tell if you are concerned about every little penny that you have, then there's a question about whether or not maybe you have some questionable ancestry, because that is not a Jewish attitude. So nehi devasar haki machiole sara b'shate milei. Well, 1 second, you're right that a Jew will forgive. But does that mean that there's no pain at the time? Of course there's pain at the time, and of course that means that it's prohibited. And so as a result, it is usher. So that's so it could be, in fact, that we're talking about less than a pruta. So kusi bekusi kiyotze behen. So 1 second, when you have a kuti stealing from a kuti, so kevan delab b'nei mechilaninhu gazel ma'al yahu. But if you have a kuti stealing from a kuti, and a kuti doesn't forgive a small robbery, well, then taking even something that's less than a shava pruta is full-fledged robbery. So in fact, that doesn't work either. So as a result, we need to give a third answer, and that's offered by Rav Acha bar Brei de Rav Ika. So Ella Amar Rav Acha Brei de Rav Ika, lo nitzrucha ela lakovish schar sachir. No, we're talking about somebody who withholds the wages of a hired worker. Kusi b'Yisrael aser, when it comes to a Jew, a non-Jew and a non-Jew, or a non-Jew against the Jew, so then it's absolutely prohibited. But Yisrael b'kuti mutter. But again, when it comes to a Jew withholding wages from a non-Jew, it technically, again, is permitted, but the rabbis, again, would say that it is prohibited. So we said we came up with something that is similar to theft. So now what's similar to to taking a beautiful woman in battle? So ki asa Rav Dimi, Amar Rabbi Lazar, Amar Rabbi Chanina, ben Noach sheyiched shivcha la'avodo uva aleha nerag aleha. So if a Noachite sets aside a slave woman for his own slave, so you might have thought that, well, look, it's his slave. He can do whatever he wants to his slave. And then he has relations with her. He's going to be executed on that basis, because the relations that the slave has with the slave woman, that already constitutes some sort of marriage when it comes to non-Jews. But when it comes to a Jew, so then a Jew who does that, if in fact and Rashi helps us out here, he explains that the situation is if a non-Jew sets aside a slave woman for his slave, and then a Jew comes in battle and takes this slave woman, so he's allowed to still have relations with her, even though that Noachite is not allowed to have relations with her, because again, he's allowed to have relations even if the woman, the beautiful woman, was currently married. The Torah permits that. So as a result, this too would be permitted. So that is the similar situation of the situation to the Yifas Toar. So now the Baraisa did not mention a law similar to murder. So the point is that, right, we use the phrase kayotze bo only in connection with the end of the Brisa, the end of the Brisa, which talked about theft. But the beginning of the brisa, which we quoted second, which referred to murder, we didn't use al shvichas damim v'chein kayotze behen. We didn't use that phraseology, and so the Gemara explains kayotze bo the shvichas damim lo tanya. It doesn't the language.
I just want to go back to the previous case. Well, I understand the case of the Jew taking the Yifat Torah, but what's the scenario where the non-Jew is executed, killed for this? Who is he? Is he in? Is he? We want to say he's fighting in a battle and he's taking Yifat Torah, and he would be executed.
Correct. If he comes and takes a Yifat Torah, that is not permitted for a non-Jew in battle.
Well, I mean, how is that even related to us? If we're what's the scenario? If non-Jews are fighting between each other, the Syrians and the Lebanese, whatever the story is, well, how are we getting involved in their justice to killing one of these people who took a Yifat Torah?
So it would need to be that the person is somehow in our jurisdiction. They then move with their new wife into Israel. And that's what the situation. And we would say, no, listen, that you're subject to the death penalty because you're not allowed to take another man's wife. Amar Abaye. So let's just I want to make sure we get the daf done. So again, we did not have something similar to murder because Amar Abaye imishkachas the Tanya. If you find a brisa that says that there is a situation that's similar to murder, where there's a distinction between the way Jews are treated and non-Jews are treated. So Rabbi Yonasan ben Shaul, it's got to be Rabbi Yonasan ben Shaul. The Tanya, Rabbi Yonasan ben Shaul Omer Rodev achar chaveru lahargo. When it comes to somebody who's chasing you to kill you, and you are able to stop them by hitting them in one of their limbs and not killing them, below hitzil, but you didn't use that method to save the person, and instead you killed him. Neragalav. Well, then you yourself are killed. Again, that is the opinion of Rabbi Yonasan ben Shaul. However, the other opinion is actually no. Even if you could have stopped the person by not killing them, but instead maiming them, according to the rabbis, you are not going to get killed. So Rashi tells us, top of Rashi on Zayin Bet, Hainu kiyotzibo. This is a case that's similar to murder. The shvichus damim, that's similar to murder. The habi karav lahatir, that it's close to being permitted. Ve'eno mutter, but it's not actually permitted. Kuti bekuti b'Yisrael. When you have two non-Jews or a non-Jew with a Yisrael, chayiv, you would actually be liable for the death penalty. V'chein Yisrael b'Yisrael. And similarly, when it comes to a Jew against a Jew, ava Yisrael bekuti pater. But when it comes to a Jew against a non-Jew, well, then you would be exempt. V'aliba de Rabbi Yonatan aval Rabbanan pligi aleha v'amri heter gamarhu. So again, all of that is according to Rabbi Yonatan, but according to the rabbis, they would say that it's completely permitted, and so that's why our brisa does not say that there's something similar to murder that has the same kind of distinction. Okay, so now yesterday on Nun Vav Amabet, we noted that there may be differences between the procedures when the accused is Jewish and when the accused is not. So the Gemara now discusses this issue, and this touches exactly on the question that Ken raised about giving warnings. How are we giving warnings to these non-Jews? And the answer is going to be that we don't need to. So let's take a look. Ashkach Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha to have a ksiv b'sefer Agada debei Rav. Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha found that there was a book of Agada written in the yeshiva of Rav, and it said the following: Ben Noach nerag b'dayan echad, a non-Jew is killed with one judge, ube'ed echad, with one witness, shelo b'hasra, without any warning, mipi ish v'lo mipi isha. But it requires that it come from a man and not from a woman, meaning that either the judge, Rashi says that the judge or the witness need to be male. Va'afilu karov, but it can even come through a relative. Mishum Rabbi Yishmael Amru, in the name of Rabbi Yishmael, they said, that they're even liable for killing a fetus. And this is a very important topic because this is a key source in the question of whether or not abortion is legal for non-Jews from a Jewish perspective. So Av al ha'iburin haka hakeh et ha'isha v'yatza. So Rashi says, top line, Av al ha'iburin hika es ha'isha, if he hits the woman, v'yatzu yaladeha, and she miscarries, nerag alehen, they are killed as a result. Will be Israel, but when it comes to a Jew, until the baby is actually born, comes out into the air of the world, they're not going to get killed. As we see in Maseches Nida, Daf Mem Daled Amud Aleph, Tinok ben Yom Echad, that if you have a baby that's even 1 day old, Hahorgo Chayev, that one who kills that baby is going to be liable to the death penalty. Hechi de Kimle Begave Shikalu Kol Lo Chadashav Ve'enu Nafel. That, but you need to be able to show that this baby was born full term and was not actually a miscarriage. Okay, so that is the addition that Rabbi Yishmael offers. And so the Gemara asks, Minahani Mili, how do we know all of this? How do we know specifically that there's only one, that you only need one judge, that you need one witness, and you don't need warning? So Amar Rabbi Yehuda de Amar Kra, Ach im dimchem lenafshosechem edrosh. However, your blood of your souls I will seek. What does that mean? Afilu b'dayan echad, meaning there's singular in that word, in that sense, edrosh. So as a result, even though I think that's referring to Hashem, it's going to be the singular usage teaches just one judge. Miyad kol chaya, from the hand of every living thing. Afilu shelo b'hasra, you don't even need any kind of warning. Edrishenu miyad ha'adam, and it's got to come from the hand of man. Afilu ba'ed echad, even again singular, even one witness. Miyad ish, again it says the hand of man. Lo miyad isha, so not the woman. Achiv, his brother. Afilu karo, it shows that even a relative. So we see from this pasuk that we're going to take away that all of these rules apply. So
Mishum that meaning that what? That it could be killed for what? For killing a fetus? I mean, that's what.
Well, no, we haven't yet dealt with the proof for the fetus. We're going to do that right now, but right now it's showing that you only need one judge, one witness, and no warning is necessary. But you do need to have a male judge or a male witness, and you do but the witness and judge could even be a relative.
But we did say with Rashi that if the Vlad was lost, right, or killed in this process, the person is chayiv.
Yeah, that we're about to get that. That's Rabbi Yishmael's statement, which we're about to see and try and prove.
But we talked about Afal Iborim.
Yes. Give me 2 seconds. The Gemara is about to deal with it. Mishum Rabbi Yishmael Amru Afal Ubarin. Also for the fetuses, right? The point is that the first proof was of the first statement in the Brisa. There were 2 statements in the Brisa. When the second statement was made by Rabbi Yishmael, was made in the name of Rabbi Yishmael. So in the name of Rabbi Yishmael, we said that this is true also for killing a fetus. So my time with the Rabbi Yishmael, what's the basis of Rabbi Yishmael's statement? Ksiv shofech dam adam damo yishafech. Ezehu adam shehu ba'adam. Who is the man whose blood is in a man? So Havi Omer Ze Uber Shibimei Imo. That's the fetus inside the mother. The Tana Kama, Tana de Bei Menashe, and the person who disagrees with this is the Tana of Bei Menashe. Now we don't paskin like the Tana of Bnei Menashe, which is why the understanding is that of many opinions is that we say that abortion is prohibited, and indeed is way worse for a non-Jew to do against a non-Jew than for a Jew to do against a Jew. But Tana Kama Tana Devei Menashehu, and the first opinion of our of the Brisa is from the yeshiva of Menashe, because the Amar Kol Misa Amura of Nei Noach Einu Elechenek, because he says that the death penalty is actually strangulation, and I mentioned this at the very beginning. The Shadile Ha'adam Hai Ba'adam Asefe Dekra, because they put the Ba'adam at the end of the pasuk. Udarish Beihachi, and they learn it the following: Ba'adam damo yishafech. Only inside the person will his blood be shed. And Ezo shvichos damim shel adam shehu begufo shel adam habezeh. So that's strangulation. That's where somebody is essentially the shedding of blood inside, and so that's indicates that non-Jews are going to be punished with strangulation, not with beheading. So Masiv Rav Hamnuna. So Rav Hamnuna challenges ruling. Now, by the way, I will note that again, we don't paskin that way. We would paskin that for non-Jews it would be beheading, but it's going to be relevant in a few moments. So Masiv Rav Hamnuna, the Isha lo mifkeda. 1 second, maybe we should say that a woman doesn't get killed if she kills somebody. I'm sorry. Are you saying that a woman is not part of the non-Jewish judicial system? We have a pasuk in connection with Abraham that he's going to command his descendants, who are both Jewish and non-Jewish, that say that they're going to do tzedek u'mishpat. So mishpat includes judicial rules. So doesn't that imply that women are subject to the judicial rules and judicial process? No, who mosiv la, v'hu mefarik la. So Rav Hamnuna asked the question and he answered it. Banav din beisol tzedakah. That when it comes to his sons, that's where the justice is applied. That's the mishpat. But when it comes to beito, which Rashi says refers to the women, so then that's just the righteousness. So there's not a specific obligation to that they also be participants in the judicial process. Amrle Rav Avya Sabala Rav Papa Amos ben Noach Shaharga Lo Te'areg Miyad Ish below Miyad Isha Ksiv. Maybe we should say that the daughter of a Noach, meaning a woman who kills somebody, should not be killed because of the basis of the word Miyad Ish, from the hand of man. Maybe the hand refers to the hand of the man who's doing the killing, and therefore only a man who murders will be killed if they're not Jewish. So Amrlei Hachi Amar Rav Yehuda Shofech Dam Ha'adam Mikol Makom. It doesn't make a difference. In some ways, it's whoever sheds blood, implying doesn't make a difference whether the person is male or female. Emas Bas Noach Shedzinsa Lo Tehareg. Maybe we should say the same thing based on adultery, that women who are not Jewish who commit adultery are not punished. Diksiv Al Kain Yazov Ish Velo Isha, because it says in Bereshis Perek Bet Pasuk Kaf Dalid that a man leaves his mother and doesn't refer to a woman leaving her parents. So Amrlei Hachi Amar Rav Yehuda V'hayu LeBasar Achad Hadar Arvinhu Kra. So when it says that the man and the woman will become one flesh, so that shows that the man and the woman are together and effectively are subject to the same rules, and so as a result, women also would be covered. Tanur Rabbanan Ish. Matamud Lomer Ish Ish. So Rashi tells us that this pasuk is referring to the sexual transgressions. We had already seen this in connection with other prohibitions, namely the prohibition of blasphemy. But now we're going to note the fact that it has the pasuk Ish Ish. This is a pasuk in Vayikra Perek Yud Chet Pasuk Vav. So why does it repeat the Ish? Ish l'rabos is a kutim, to tell us that non-Jews are also covered by the prohibition of sexual transgressions. Shemuzharin al harayas ki Yisrael, that they're just like a Jew from that perspective. V'hamahacha nafka, mahasam nafka. But 1 second, we learned all the way back when we had the original list of 7 different prohibitions that the word lemor that when we went through the original list of 7, we said the word lemor taught us that Gilu Arayas. So why do we need 2 psukim to tell us? So Hasam ba'arayas did who? V'hacha ba'arayas didan. No, it tells us that there's 2 separate categories. There are it's when the woman is married, is not Jewish and married. And then there's a situation where the woman is Jewish and married. So when it comes to the pasuk Ish Ish in Sefer Vayikra, it's telling us that a non-Jewish man who has an affair with a Jewish married woman is going to also be punished. The Katani Sefer Ba'al Arayot Yisrael Nidon B'Dinei Yisrael, that if a non-Jew has relations with somebody who is Jewish, so then he'll be judged like a Jewish under Jewish law. So Lamai Hilchasa, What do you mean that he's going to be judged under Jewish law? Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabbi Ravua, lo nitzrucha el le'eda ve'edim lasra. It's talking about that if under Jewish law you need 2 witnesses, you need an eda, you need 23 judges because it's a capital case, and you need to give warning. So migra gara, you're going to make it easier to kill a non-Jew if he has an affair with a non-Jewish woman than it is when he has an affair with a Jewish woman? That can't be. So Elam Rabbi Yochanan lo nitzrucha ela nara ma'orasa. No, we're talking about only where there's a erison, where there's only been betrothal and not nesuin. And we're dealing with a nara, dilididhu leislahu, because there is no concept of betrothal for non-Jews. You're either married or you're not married. There is no middle step. When you have when a non-Jewish couple marries and they have relations, so then they're married. When they don't, if they don't have relations, so then even if they're engaged, there is no legal status to it. So dilididhu leislahu, because they don't have any concept of betrothal. The daininan lohu bedina didan. So since under their laws there's no betrothal, so we're going to require them to be subject to our laws, meaning that in fact you would need multiple witnesses, you would need 23 judges, and you would need to give them warning. Aval eshes ish. What about when it's a fully married a Jewish woman, Bedina didhu, daininan lahu. So is it really true that we're going to use their judges, their system? Vatanya, Baal na ramel rasa, nidon beskila, al eshes ish, nidon bechenek, ve'i bedina. And we say that when it comes to a ramel rasa, we're going to judge the kuti with stoning. We're going to execute them with stoning. And al eshes ish, and with a regular married woman, we're going to judge him with strangulation. But I thought you said that we know that the prohibition is that the penalty is not supposed to be strangulation. It's supposed to be a beheading. And if you're going to tell him the bedina didhu, sayavhu, it's supposed to be beheading. So it must be that when a non-Jewish man has relations with a Jewish married woman, that in fact it's being judged with Jewish law. So not necessarily. Amar of Nachman bar Yitzchak, my ashes, and Tosfos points out that, well, we could also just say that this brisa follows the Debei Menashe, the Tana Debei Menashe, who say that strangulation is the general penalty, but we don't want to do that. We want to say that it's like the more prominent position of that sword is the proper punishment for non-Jews. So Amar of Nachman bar Yitzchak, my ashes ishta katani. What kind of married woman are we talking about? We're dealing with a situation where they had a chuppah, but they were not yet but they did not actually have relations to one another. Because according to the non-Jewish law, just going into the chuppah, going into a home together, does not actually make them married. What makes them married is having relations. And so as a result, that is not going to, so therefore, because under the non-Jewish laws, that's not going to be considered a full-fledged marriage. So as a result, we can't judge him based on non-Jewish law. So we have to judge him based on Jewish law because this is a Jewish woman. So we're going to have to apply all of the Jewish procedures for him. So to Tani Rabbi Chanina, and we have a Rabbi Chanina taught along these lines, Be'ulas Baal Yesh Lahen, that when it comes to having relations with a husband, so that is already going to be liability, and that's the rule that they have. Nichnas l'chuppah, but when you have a rule about going into the chuppah, below nivala, but they have not yet had relations, ein lahen, they don't have adultery under their system, and so as a result, you would need to judge them under our system. So the next step is going to be to bring a brisa. We was hoping to get a little bit further. We're going to bring a brisa that supports this particular Rabbi Yochanan's view that we saw today. Rabbi Yochanan said that the brisa was only needed for betrothal of a na'ara, meaning that a non-Jew is going to only be judged using the Jewish judicial system when you have a na'ara hamorasa, when you have somebody who's betrothed, because under the non-Jewish system, there is no betrothal. So as a result, under the non-Jewish system, if you were to apply those laws, there would be no death penalty whatsoever. But it's certainly going to be prohibited for a non-Jew to have relations with a betrothed Jew. And so as a result, we're going to apply to them not only the Jewish law to say that she's married, but also all of the Jewish procedures that are associated with it in order to make sure that we implement the Jewish penalty in an appropriate manner. So again, we're going to see that in a brisa, God willing, tomorrow. So please stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. Pick up from there, God willing, tomorrow.
Why do we conclude regarding the quote unquote abortion, where the Uber either he fell or not? And Rashi seemed to suggest that, if I understood what he said, that the person would be the Jew would be chayav for, but
no, we're talking about non-Jews. That brisa that we quoted was about non-Jews performing abortion.
Not the brisa, Rashi.
Rashi was saying, yes. So Rashi says you're not liable for the death penalty for abortion. That's 100%. That's 100% clear. A Jew is absolutely, there's no death penalty for a Jew for performing an abortion. Whether or not it's prohibited is something completely separate.
And the non-Jew is
all right, we are going to have to, I'm sorry that we have to end, but God willing, we can talk about this, God willing, tomorrow. Have a great day. Thanks so much.